Hey everybody, this is Professor Lucien, and this is our recorded lecture for Thanksgiving week, which is week 13, and this is going to be covering chapter 12, which is entitled Emergency Preparedness. Before I get into reviewing the chapter, just want to remind everybody what was assigned for this week, and that is the Home Safety and Emergency Preparedness Plan. Something I'd like you to work with your family or friends or roommates over this Thanksgiving holiday. So just really quickly, I just want to go over it again, just to kind of remind you all what's expected. Again, it's meant to be kind of fun, I guess. It's meant to kind of encompass a lot of parts of this course. So as you see here, and you're going to be developing kind of your own format. It's whatever you're comfortable with. It would be nice if you could make it so I could kind of follow along and answer the 10 questions, but we're going to be taking things from these 6 chapters. There are others as well, but it kind of encompasses an overall assessment of current conditions and planning that you, your family, your roommates, relatives, whoever you have access to over Thanksgiving. And I encourage you to involve them and to utilize the textbook. So this is kind of an overview of some of the things I want you to look at based on what the chapters had called for. So let's get to the actual what's required. I would like you to take photographic evidence and share it if you can. I think it just makes it easier to answer the question. Okay, so here are the parts. Question 1 for safety at home. I want you to inspect your home or wherever you are for tipping hazards, and that can be bookshelves, cabinets, dressers, things like that. Report your findings. If there are anchors already there, take a picture. If there aren't, take pictures of that too. So just report. That's pretty quick run through. Just do the bedrooms. Another one is inspect for cleaning chemicals. Say, hey, where do you keep your cleaning chemicals? It's usually like in a lower cabinet or a shelf or something or a pantry. Check it out, take a picture just to see what's there. Look and see if there's anything leaking or worn. Could children easily get them? Report it. So you see these first 2, each maybe take 5 minutes, okay? Next, focus your visual inspection on whatever paint or home improvement. So this will take a little bit longer. This is going to be a garage or a shed or a basement workshop. And then just kind of document what they have. If they're storing propane inside, that's not good, you guys. Because what if it leaks? Gasoline, sure, that can be in a garage, but it needs to be in a well-ventilated place. It needs to be enclosed. Where are they storing their used oils and solvents and things like that? Any sign of leak or damage? Any potential fire hazards? And just report it. So that one could take 20 to 30 minutes because sometimes you have to run around and look for stuff. This is going to be, a very interesting one because we've got 3 different chapters involved. Next, go inspect their refrigerator. Talk to whoever is the main cook in the house. Who regularly checks for expired products? Also, what I want you to do is observe how they, after the big meal, or any meal, you could do a dinner or whatever, something in which they do something that's prepared. How do they put it into storage and how do they cool it? Because you guys remember when Dave Vosberg came in and talked about that. You've got the 2-hour window to get it from, to be served, to be ready to put it into the fridge, and then you got 4 hours to bring it down to refrigerator temperature, which is below 40 degrees. And are they putting it, in big containers so that the inside isn't going to cool, or do they let it kind of spread out so it cools easier? And maybe you can help them if you want, but document that. For transportation, I want you to look into a vehicle. And this is one you don't have to do on Thanksgiving, but just look in the glove box. What do they have for documentation? Is it registered? Is it insured? What to do in case of an accident? Do they have a maintenance record? Another is you could check for, do they have a emergency kit in their car? Because we're talking about it this week. I wish I had looked ahead. You could do that too. I'm going to talk about those. Next is choose some form of recreational, whether it's a vehicle or a device. Could be a child seat if you've got younger children. And then what I want you to do is just look up that type on the Consumer Product Safety Commission website and see if there's been any recalls. If there has, inform them. If there hasn't, no big deal. Just report what you did. For fire safety, just kind of go through and take a general look at the detectors and ask if you can test them. If you ignite one, do they all activate? Or if you activate one, and so they're interconnected? That's just what I want you to do. And ask them about what do they have in place for making sure, that they're functioning properly. And then also look to see if they have any fire extinguishers. And if they do, just kind of document what they have. Okay? So that'll take a little bit longer. Let's see. Next is ask them what, while we were talking about fire extinguishers and detectors, what's their plan? Should a fire break out? Have they ever run a drill? So that's a quick discussion. You don't have to give me the pathways or anything. Just discuss, what you've done. Next is emergency preparedness. So for a medical or shelter-in-place event, so severe weather, power outage, damage, what sort of kits or materials does the residents have? Do you have alternative cooking and heating? Do you have, alternative information gathering? That'd be like a weather radio, something like that. So just kind of have a discussion about that, try to document what's there. And this lecture right now is going to cover that. Next is what if you have to evacuate in case of disasters? What would you take with you? What should you have in your vehicle to ensure that if you do get stranded somewhere, you can survive until assistance can arrive. So that's what I want you to do. And again, I don't have like a worksheet to give you, but just sort of a write up of these 10 things and clearly indicate what you're responding to in these 10 items. Okay, so that is the assignment, and you'll upload that by December 1st, which is Sunday, to this folder right here, and we'll talk about it next week. So this week we're doing chapter 12. It's week 13, emergency preparedness, and I provide you with a lot of links. I read the chapter several times. I wrote the quiz, and then I chose these based on that. So if that gives you any indication of what I'm going to be asking you. Excuse me. So here's a chapter. Again, it's well written by Dr. Buckman. She has a lot of experience in emergency preparedness, disaster response. And it gives a very good scenario for Riley, in which, they decided not to drive in blizzard-like conditions, which is the best choice. Because, would you rather be stranded in your residence, or would you rather be stranded on the road? One has a much higher probability of survival, especially for a length of time. And so Riley decides to hang back, and it's like, how do I keep warm and keep food? And it is something that you should be thinking about. Here are some of the numbers. It talks about different types of disasters right here, because usually we wait till something bad to happen before we actually enact rules and prep. The idea being is, you should be able to estimate what sort of potential emergencies or disasters you may incur over a period of time, and then what can you do to ensure that you remain current on status, that you can communicate with others, that you have resources to sustain yourself, your family, pets, whatever, during an emergency until help can arrive. And before that, what can you do to possibly protect yourself from these disasters? Because every area has something you have to deal with. So Dr. Bookman gets into some disasters. So, what's the difference between a hurricane and a tornado? Well, I actually found an interesting comparison that's by NASA. And I believe it is right here. So what's the difference between a tornado and a hurricane? Although tornadoes actually, on average, have higher wind speed, they're much narrow in scope and much more short-lived. So it isn't so it'll devastate a very narrow swath where it's on the ground, but not too far from it, you won't even be touched. And so the emergency response for tornadoes tends to be much better. You tend to not have to survive for longer periods of time. But again, it can devastate. So having a residence or a place you can go to withstand that short period of time of intensity is the goal. Whereas if it's a hurricane, there are things you can do, yeah, but it's a wider swath. It lasts a lot longer. And what a lot of people do is they'll try to evacuate. So a tornado tends to be a shelter in place versus a hurricane. Sure, you can shelter in place, but because of storm surge, depending on where you are, and flooding, you may want to evacuate. So just want to kind of talk about that. That's one of the links that I provided to you. I just summarized it. So it talks about tornado, wildfires. If you're in a place where there is a lot of fuel, dry fuel, and sustained dry air or winds, lightning can ignite it. An electrical issue can light it. Improper containment of a campfire or can light it as well. It can damage hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of acres. Earthquakes, if you live near a fault line, it's much more likely. Floods, if you live close to rivers that handle a majority of a heavy rainfall and you're close to a place that has a heavy rainfall. Also, if you're in a place where there is storm surge, that can also be an issue. Volcanic eruptions, again, if you're near, a fault line where hot magma may come to the surface and do damage. And then tsunamis tend to be the result of underwater earthquakes, in which there's a massive shift in the floor, causing a large set of waves. That's when you're inland, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So there are 4 phases to emergency management. Prevention, protection, and mitigation, and Dr. Bookman talks about it. I think this is really important to understand. So assessing where you're going to live, and then based on where you live, doing an assessment of what can you do to prevent being part of a disaster and emergency, protect yourself what can you do to protect yourself, to mitigate, structural damage or things like that. And finally, is there anything you do to control it? And she talks about insurance being important here too, that how are you going to recover afterwards? So it's kind of all up here. Preparation is your planning and getting the resources you need in place should the emergency or disaster occur. And then the response is putting your plans into action. And then recovery is how do you get things back to normal post, disaster emergency. And so this is all very good stuff. And I want you to kind of think about, and that's what this whole assignment is about, is, assessing and preparing and, what would happen if you had to put it into place. And then also the recovery part, is the assistance going to be there? So she talks about personal responsibilities. If medical emergency is an issue, who is CPR certified, who knows how to render first aid, things like that. Or if active shooter is a big concern, or have you received the proper training? And you can seek out this training from things like community emergency response teams, things like that. Government responsibilities. So that's where I want to spend a little bit of time here. That they do monitoring, they do research, they activate alert systems. So let's take a look at several of them. So I think what we'll do is start with NOAA. So this is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So they're the big one. They're the ones who are going to be monitoring things. And they actually, underneath NOAA is the National Weather Service. And that's who we typically get. So you get a NOAA weather radio as a backup. And they will send alerts. And those are the alerts we get on our phones as well if you sign up for it. In which case, they let us know that we can go through the different phases. What are the different phases? Well, there is a watch. A watch basically states that based on forecasting and overall pressure patterns and weather, I'm not going to say weather, I'm going to say pressure fronts, things like that. There is the predicted development of severe weather. And so we're going to watch it. Advisory means yes. So something is going to occur, but at this point in time, it's going to be a lesser degree, but that degree could change depending on, the predictability of it. Warning is it's impending. Severe weather is going to hit this area, activate your plans. So watch is just, it could. So just keep an eye and make sure you're listening to updates. Watch means that, okay, these conditions are developing, but at this point in time, they're not advisory. They're not, they could get worse, but at this point in time, just be aware, be careful. And then warning is activate it. Activate your plans because severe weather is going to hit. So that's NOAA, which is, again, they do the research. They're the big agency. National Weather Service is under NOAA. Okay. All right, let's go back to this. What other sort of government things are there? So FEMA is another. That's the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And they are part of the response. They will be working with other agencies, but they manage. So engaged in mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery activities at the federal level. And you've heard of them, right? Because they're a big part of responding to major disasters. We've seen that in the past. Voluntary agencies such as American Red Cross, there are other humanitarian efforts as well. They also do respond, and they would then collaborate with the people who are overseeing it, which would be FEMA. Let's see. I do have some FEMA links as well. There it is. So here is FEMA. Do I have FEMA in any others? I thought I had more than one FEMA, but here's FEMA. They provide resources. So this is one of your resources that you can look to through your assessment and preparation, and knowing who to contact and what sort of resources or responses available to your area depending on things. The other thing that I really wish the chapter talked about is ready.gov. Ready.gov is an agency. This is more of a campaign. This is housed under the Department of Homeland Security. I believe FEMA is too. Aren't they under? Isn't FEMA under Homeland Security as well? Does it say? Oh yeah, they are. Okay, so FEMA is as well. So here is the main page. So it's already starting to inform about holiday cooking safety, and we had talked about that with the fire unit, flooding, winter weather, severe weather, be ready, build a kit, all that stuff. And I believe I've got a link here for this is interesting. I didn't know this because I didn't acknowledge it until now, and I'm going to start doing it. It's that September is National Preparedness Month, and I really wish I had known that. I would have maybe talked about it more. So they've got toolkits. What is this? They've got graphics. Maybe that'll come in faster. It's not. But anyway, so the last is build a kit. So if you need to build an emergency or basic disaster kit, this provides some resources. I also took the liberty of searching for kits we could buy. So here is a roadside kit. Or basically a vehicle kit. It has the things that a lot of the vehicles, especially if you lived in the upper Midwest all your life, these are types of things you do have in your vehicle. And then I also searched for home emergency kits, and they've got additional resources here. And I actually went down a rabbit hole. I actually have this. I purchased this. I also have a solar chargeable battery backup. They were on sale. I think I got it for I think it was $20. I got both of them for $20. But I've got these lanterns. But these are just different things, especially as Christmas is coming up. If you're finding you need these types of things, they have them in kits now that you can purchase. There's a lot of videos of doomsday preppers, and they talk about this, but they go way over and beyond. They're planning for months to survive for months on their own versus just, a few days up to 2 weeks. Okay. So those are just some Amazon things I wanted to share. That's the NOAA. We've got the ready.gov, which is cool. We've got FEMA. I'll come back to my remaining links as we get closer to the end. So one thing you can do is conduct a hazard and vulnerability assessment, which is HVA. And that's another thing, as I'm going through here, I am acknowledging NOAA, Ready, the Emergency Preparedness Month, that, preparedness is the planning. That's what this is all about. These are all quiz questions, by the way. the system of watch, advisory, warning, FEMA, and now this. So we're 7 questions into the quiz now. So one thing you can do is perform this, this assessment. And here, even though I don't know how to turn it, I apologize. You can see here it's much, we use failure modes and effect analysis in the safety field, and that's what this really looks like, is an assessment of what could impact you, and then finding ways to reduce that threat through your planning and preparation, that preparedness. Got a list here of natural occurring events. Kind of talked about these. Another quiz question is, here in Wisconsin, what are our biggest threats that we should be prepared for? Tornado is definitely one of them, and another is cold. Because those 2 things are going to be our biggest threats. We should be prepared for those the most. Blizzard is in there, ice storm is in there, all this other stuff too, but those are the 2 primaries. What are we going to do to shelter in place? What are we going to do if we get caught out in the cold to protect ourselves, to survive until the threat either passes or emergency or disaster recovery can come help us out. Didn't talk too much about the technology. Other than, part of your overall preparation is, how do I remain in contact with the outside world if I lose the internet and I lose cellular service, lose power? What are we going to do? Do we have power backup, or are there things we can use alternative forms of heat or power to get by? For water, what do we have for backup systems if the water becomes contaminated? Do we have alternative forms of fuel? Again, how do we communicate with the outside world? What do we do when we aren't able to travel or access the internet? These are things to talk about, and I would like you to talk about these things while you're working on this project, because we assume that stuff's always going to be there. Like, oh, I'll just look it up. What if you can't? What do you need on hand so you can get by? So a NOAA weather radio. We have a couple of them. I know in September, the local meteorologists, the local news stations, you can purchase them and then they'll set them up for you. And then you'll get the alerts from the closest National Weather Service. I believe Milwaukee is the one that usually does a lot of the alerts, warnings for Wisconsin. So she talks more about that as well. Creating a plan is very important. First, you have to assess what the threats may be, but then, what are you going to do? So how are you going to receive alerts and notifications? A lot of them get them on our phones. You should sign up for that if you haven't. Then you've got the radio backup, and I know it's annoying that every month they go through that alert system testing, but it's good to go through that. Make sure you do get it, and they tend to test that the first Wednesday of every month or something like that. Yeah, you should have, again, backup alert system. So having a weather radio, or what's funny is, you guys rely a lot on using the internet for a lot of your entertainment, but do you have a backup? Do you have a digital antenna that's hooked up to one of your TVs so you can receive broadcasts from local sources? Are you aware of the local radio stations, or do you only listen to Spotify or some other, music source? This is all really important things that you're aware of to get emergency information through non-internet sources or non-web-based sources. Know who your local jurisdiction is for emergency type things. It talks about different. So I tend to use local weather for a lot of my stuff, and I do believe I have an example of that. I've got. So this is a weather alert system through.
All right, Brian, thank you. We'll see you soon. Wisconsin Emergency Management is 15. Also gearing up ahead of the snowstorm. The department is in charge of helping the county when an emergency occurs, which includes winter storm or blizzard warning. Officials are encouraging you to plan now before the storm hits so you can be prepared. With many people hitting the roads for the holidays, the department public officer says always check road conditions before heading out the door.
Recommend looking at 511 Wisconsin to look at those travel conditions. You can select it to winter road impacts. So that will tell you those major roads. You can also stay tuned to local TV news for the weather forecast because you want to be weather aware.
And Katie also says to make sure you have the necessary items in your car and home in case of an emergency. Things like extra blankets, food, water, and flashlights.
Cancer is...
Okay, so that was just one report. And then this is something else I found. I don't know if I can expand this or not. Okay, so that was a message from the Cleveland Clinic. They provide things in the summer about heat and all that stuff. So in winter, you should prepare. I mean, you should watch the weather, as far as what are the watches, are there any advisories, what's the forecast? And before you travel, you should be checking out 511 Wisconsin. And here you can bring up the map. And you can see right now I've got... Okay, winter road conditions. I can click on this. Everything's green, which is good winter driving. I do check this out because I live up here in Cottage Grove and I have to commute to work. Where's Whitewater? Right here. So I can get an alert. And these alerts come through the state police, law enforcement. They give updates on conditions. And if it's bad and going to get worse, whether it's snow covered, ice covered, or travel not advised, I look for alternative ways to teach classes, things like that. That's what I use. And you can see here, you can click all kinds of stuff as far as what's going on. Weather radar. I'll take off incidents. I don't see anything going on here. Weather alerts, weather forecast. So there's different things you can do here. So if you're going to be traveling, plan ahead. You can look and see how things are, how things will be. Use local weather. These are all things you should be doing. So that's another thing I would be looking at. I have 2 other videos. I'm going to let you watch these. These are prepper-like things, so they give interesting insights, but not part of the quiz. So, So the last couple things I want to discuss here to kind of wrap this up is, the importance of being alert. In fire, we had talked about there's detection and alarm so you can escape, right? Early notification is hyper important when it comes to severe weather events or other types of disasters because that gives you time to activate your plans. If you didn't have a plan, yikes, you got to use that time to figure out some sort of modified, ad hoc plan. But that's why it's so important to take the time to really think things through. What are we going to do? What would I grab if I had to bug out? Is my car equipped with an emergency kit? Should it break down? Can I survive until help can be contacted and brought to me? I don't know what I'm trying to say here. And here's just some good tips on things you can do to conserve battery. So here, let's talk about that, yeah? Back when I was a child, it was winter and there was an enormous blizzard and the power was knocked out because it was an ice storm and it got too heavy in the lines broke, so we were without power. So, therefore, what did my parents do? Well, they sent me outside to bring in as much firewood as possible because we had a wood fireplace. No electric was needed. And so we stoked that. Another thing is they were avid campers. And so they brought out a cooktop using white gasoline, which has lower chance of creating carbon monoxide or other everything. So they could use it indoors. And they cooked us breakfast on it. And heated the house, and we just played video games and we had candles and we stayed in the basement and my dad put up blankets towards the rest of the house. So we kept the heat in that area. And that's what we did that day. And I believe by the next morning, we all just kind of slept, on sleeping bags and the couches that were there. But the next morning, the power was back on. They could run the furnace. And that was that. We made through no problem. And we didn't have power, so we just entertained ourselves. What would you do today, you guys? One important thing you should always be doing is keep your gas tank above half in the winter. I know they say that so that water doesn't build up in the tank, but it's better to always have over half a tank, because what if you get stuck? You at least have half a tank that you can run to warm yourself, to charge things. A lot of you allow your phones to get below 10%. Charge that thing. Have backup power that you can plug in to charge it. So whenever I travel, for work, I make sure that I've got backup power if I ever need to charge my phone, so I have that available all the time. So those are things to think about, And so my home, and I'm going to be doing the same assessment you guys do. We have solar. We have a Ford F-150 that has a 7.2 kilowatt generator built into it. I have an electric car. We've got other forms of backup energy. We can cook with natural gas. We've got a fire starter that's rechargeable, so it's like a small arc. We've got things we can do for food prep, for heating, and things like that. But now there's more I want to do, because as I was reading this chapter and looking things up online, there is additional things we can do. Can you isolate you and your family into a portion of the home? So for us, it would be the basement. And do we have proper sewage facilities and access to water, being able to cook and heat? Or in the summertime, can we cool ourselves? Basements tend to be really good for that, especially up here in the north when most of the basement is underground. Can you travel? Do you have resources nearby? Yes, we do. We could walk to a quick trip if we had to, or to a restaurant to get food or water. So there's things, you got to think about that kind of stuff. Do we have extra batteries? Yes, we do. Do we have extra flashlights? Yes. First aid kits? Yes. The whistle is a new one. That's interesting. What if there was social unrest? Can we protect ourselves? We can, we do have firearms and bows and things like that. We know how to use them. We do have locks for things. I'm pretty handy. I've got tools, so I can do stuff. And I don't want to get all, crazy zombie apocalypse or anything, but yeah, there are things you can do. Do you have extra pet food? How much of supplies do you keep in your home in case there's a disaster? So, yes, we are fully insured, and I review that once a year with our agent, and what that incurs. Do we have what we need? We're lucky enough to be located really close to Madison. So disaster assistance will be there should we need it. Very fortunate for that. Whereas if you live out in the country, it's going to take longer. So the key takeaways here is to understand that there is no place that's 100% safe. There are things you can do to assess, what potential disasters, emergencies you may be exposed to, and then can you, prepare properly. Preparedness is the key. Emergency preparedness. And have the resources, have the knowledge, have backup to certain, things we take for granted. And if you're notified that a disaster is imminent, do you have enough time to put those things into place to protect you, your loved ones, pets, things like that, given what may be there? So that in itself is everything for it. I went over all the quiz questions. The final ones would be early notification. You can activate plans. And the other is, what is the purpose of an emergency kit? It's to survive until assistance can be rendered. So I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving with your family. I hope it's safe. I hope it's joyous. I hope you include others in your project, because I think it's important. If you don't prepare, you basically are in many ways preparing to fail. And so that's everything. I'll see you guys back here after Thanksgiving break.